This podcast contains content that is graphic in nature and mature language that may be unsuitable for children or young listeners. Listener discretion is advised. On August 20th, 1976, two young girls went to the local Lopoo store on Carter Street in Vidalia, Louisiana. But instead of the friendly, welcoming smile of Miss Evelyn Lopoo, they found her laying in between two shelves, barely clinging to life. An immediate investigation began that would take over 2 years to arrest a suspect, and many years before a jury would hear the story of what happened in broad daylight on a Friday afternoon inside that store. And the trial concluded in a way that some found unsatisfactory. Take this journey with us back in time a ways to see how differently courtroom dynamics were then compared to now, and see for yourself if justice was served on this episode of Sin Law. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Sin Law. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Uncle Sawyer.
And I'm Tyler, and I'm taking a bye.
Kyler isn't going to be recording with us tonight because he had one rule. Kyler, what was your one rule?
I am not going to do an episode on an unsolved murder.
And technically, since this one is legally still unsolved to this day, he said he was out. So, Uncle Sawyer, he said, tap, tap, tap.
Sub.
Tap, tap,
Sub.
tap.
Calling a sub.
Tap, tap, tap.
You guys typically say tap, tap, tap.
Who says tat, tat, tat?
Tap,
Not
tap, tap.
tap, tap.
I do not say blah, blah, blah.
I did not say blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so Sawyer's gonna be Kyler, except way better.
Ooh.
Oh, you bailed on me. Okay,
Yeah, but that's
If you hadn't
typical.
said it, he would have.
it's fair.
I was going to, yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna start off by saying sorry for
Me.
that and the rain, because it is pouring, and based on our options of when we can record and how that absolutely depends on the children involved in our lives. We only have so many opportunities to be able to record. So right now it's storming. We're still recording. You like that? Okay. So also, I sound a little congested. We went swimming over the 4th of July weekend, and my sinuses got all messed up. So if I sound a little funny, or if I sound better, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, sinuses. Can I have some sinuses?
You're ridiculous.
No.
All right, so that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's case, which is taking us all the way to 1976, which is after our parents were born, but before we were born. So, in the in-between. It was August 20th, 1976, in Vidalia, on Carter Street, which is, as you know, is that main street that runs through Vidalia. And there was a wonderful elderly lady, and although I say elderly, she was 66.
How you know she was wonderful?
Because of everything that I read about her. They had multiple news articles. All of the source material that I got for this was straight out of the archives of the Concordia Sentinel. So,
Can you trust the Sentinel?
Yeah. I mean, as far as you can trust any newspaper, I do.
All I know is that every time someone's died in our family, the newspaper or the articles have always been very... And we're back.
So, yeah, we're back. And we're going to start on August 20th, 1976. Miss Evelyn Lopoo, she owned her own business on Carter Street. That was directly across from the bank, and it was called Lopoo's store. As I said in the intro, not her body because she was still technically alive, two young girls went into the shop at around 5 o'clock that evening, and they found her in between two of the shelves in the store, towards the back of the store. She was still clinging to life at that point. She was transported over the bridge to Meridian Hospital, where she later succumbed to her wounds. So she passed away around 6 p.m. that evening, and the investigation began.
What kind of wounds did she have?
I'm about to tell you.
Oh no! The suspense is killing me.
So it was later determined that she was shot 3 times, once in the chest and twice in the head with a small caliber weapon, and left for dead.
And she was alive?
And she was alive.
What a trooper.
She was shot twice in the head, and she was 66 years old the day that she died.
Daggum. Mom gets the cold and she's out for the week.
That's right.
Love you.
So, so she had powder burns that were found on her arms as she'd thrown them up to protect herself. So that also shows you how close the gun would have been because she had powder burns on her arms.
Well, yeah,
so
with a small
range.
caliber of any kind, you have to be close enough for it to actually penetrate and go
yeah.
through to do any damage.
Exactly. So, according to the newspaper article, she operated the store for 30 years, and she had just returned from making a deposit at the bank across the street because they had that time stamped or whatever, so they knew exactly. It was a very small window that they had from the time that she was shot to the time that her body was found, because she had left the bank shortly before, and the girls found her not long after. So,
well, yeah, with 3 gunshot wounds, you don't have a very big window of being alive.
Right, exactly, especially 2 to the head, exactly. So, initially they believed the murder possibly occurred as part of a botched armed robbery, but they couldn't say that with certainty because initially they had no eyewitnesses or viable suspects, and the cash register was found closed, but it didn't have any bills in it. It had a few coins, like loose coins in it, but otherwise it didn't have any, there was no cash in the thing, which on the face value of that, it seems to me like that would be more of an indicator of an armed robbery because it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon of a normal work day.
A business day.
A business day that would normally have, I would think they would normally have cash in the drawer.
And with customers literally coming in to
Right.
find her, you'd think that there were customers coming in throughout the day, being a favorite store of the place.
It was.
Area.
Yeah, exactly. And then they also found her purse, but it was in her normal quote-unquote hiding spot, and it had an undisclosed amount of money still inside of it. So my presumption was that they took all the money out of the register, but they couldn't find her purse, and she wasn't willing to tell them. And
Wait, why'd she go to the bank?
she went to go deposit 3 checks, I think.
Okay.
It wasn't a cash drop, no.
So maybe she wrote the checks herself? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
That was weird.
Or maybe it was a deposit.
I'm thinking it'd be more likely that it was a deposit right towards the end of the day.
It might have been.
was
It might have been a
Thursday?
deposit of 50 or so.
A Thursday?
It was a Friday.
A Friday? Yeah, before the weekend, depositing the week's
Yeah.
earnings.
But then she would have left herself no money for change for the rest of her business day.
It was. You said it was right around 5 o'clock, yeah?
Yeah,
So
but
that's
she wasn't
the end-
closed yet.
That's the end of the day. She was wrapping up, I guarantee it.
I don't know what time.
She didn't get to close because she was
Right,
dying.
I understand. Okay, I got you.
How you gonna put up change the sign
I'm
from open to
following-
close?
I'm following-
if
I'm
you got
following what
2 gunshots in the head.
I'm following you. I follow. I got you. I hear what you're saying.
We're gonna test that
I'm
shit.
stepping in what you're shitting.
We're gonna test that shit out.
Okay.
You gonna
so,
step in what I'm shitting?
all right. So,
That's what you said.
continuing with the crime scene. They found no bullet casings, and they believe that the weapon was likely a revolver because there was no casings at the scene, although they didn't initially release the caliber of the weapon.
22.
Don't be guessing. You don't know that yet.
Yes, I do.
Her family also reported that she was supposed to leave town the next day, so it would have made sense that she was doing the deposits because she was going out of town to do a business transaction or sale or something of the sort.
Or she want to have some pocket change, for the trip.
Maybe. The Concordia Sentinel reported that concrete leads were found in early September, but still no one was in custody, and then they set up an award fund, and that was set up within a week of her death for tips leading to an arrest, and that went on all the way through the entirety of the case, or at least until before the trial started. So it was announced on September 1st that it was a .22 caliber pistol, so good job.
Heck yeah. Oh, full disclosure, I have not read or heard any details of this case at all.
Yes, so he's hearing this completely fresh. I haven't told him any details like I would normally at least run a few things by Kyler in the same way I did with Peyton. Peyton's in another episode, so he absolutely has heard none of this. So after they released the caliber of the pistol, they also released that at the same time the caliber, they released that the state investigators were becoming involved with the case about a week later, and they put out in the news that they believed the killer was a local person or a person local to the area. So around mid-October, they updated the award fund, had raised around $6,000, which, can you guess, in 1976, can you guess how much that would have been in today's money?
Around $75,000 to $100,000.
No, you're a little overshooting.
I was gonna say 50.
$6,000 then would have equated to about $32,000 today, which is a heck of a fund, in my opinion, for that period. Like, if you think about that much money at that point in time.
You can almost buy a car with that.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. So the award money eventually turned into the reward money eventually turned into an award that was given to Vidalia High School graduates each year until it was completely depleted.
What the hell did they do to earn that?
So nothing. They just did it
I
in her
could've used
honor
that
because
money.
they had no other. They didn't want to like just leave it and let it whatever. So that's what they did with it
They
until
should have put it in a savings account, and today it would have been worth $32,000.
or more. If it
Or
gained
more.
any interest. So only one article was found that I found was in 1977. So that was the next year. They received heavy criticism, the Vidalia PD did, because of a lack of arrests and talk of Concordia Parish being the murder capital of the world. This is what actually...
Is that why they have more police per capita than anywhere else in the
I
country?
don't know. It definitely seems like it.
Today?
Well, and I think that has a lot to do with the area now and how riddled it is with big city crime for such a small town. But this article that I read this part in about it being the murder capital of the world was actually what drew me to this case when I was researching for something else. So I was just shocked that was something that was being said about Vidalia, Louisiana. And the sheriff, Fred Sheely, at the time, he was stung by these comments as the parish had only had 3 murders in the past year. And although no one had been convicted in any of these 3, he remained hopeful that arrests would eventually be made. So finally, in February of 1978, which would have been about a year and a half after the murder of Miss Evelyn Lopoo, they publicly charged an 18-year-old Vidalia resident for first-degree murder and armed robbery. God, I did it again.
Wow.
Why can't I say robbery?
Wow.
Robbery. Okay.
Robbery.
Dude.
His name was James Clayton Rogers Jr., and he was serving aboard the USS Kitty Hawk in the U.S. Navy, located in the Philippines when he was taken into custody.
The USS Kitty Hawk.
Kitty Hawk, yes. Isn't that fun?
No.
I thought it was fun.
Was he a white?
No. You can't say that.
It's the 70s. Anything goes.
We are not in the 70s.
I thought we were supposed to,
Yes.
get into the story.
Okay.
That means go into the 70s.
No, we're not like, hey, man. No, we're not doing
It's
that.
the conspiracy, man.
Okay. Now you sound
I don't sound like
Fillmore.
anything, man.
Fillmore from Cars.
Yeah, man. Trying
Anyway.
to my all natural gas, man.
Rogers was taken into custody by the Naval Investigation Service, where he was interviewed and then extradited, and he was extradited back to Vidalia, but it took a few days. So they did their initial investigation while they were on the USS Kitty Hawk. The break came for the Vidalia PD when a 13-year-old eyewitness came forward with his parents saying that he had been present when the murder/robbery took place. So he was 13-year-old at the time he came forward, but he would have been 11 at the time, and Rogers would have been 16 at the time the murder occurred.
And that is your math lesson for the day.
Da-da-da-da! You're welcome.
2 plus 11 equals 13.
There we go. The juvenile's father, the 13-year-old eyewitness, he also turned in the murder weapon, which was a .22 caliber revolver.
Called it probably Smith & Wesson. Black.
It didn't say. I didn't get that far. Conflicting information couldn't pinpoint where the father said he got the weapon. It was either found in a field or he got it from Dan, the 13-year-old eyewitness. That was his son. The article stated that they finally had sufficient evidence via the eyewitness statement and information verified by the naval investigators that interviewed Rogers, that Rogers had robbed Miss Evelyn Lopoo of between $300 and $500 or between $1,600 and $2,600 today, and then he shot her 3 times.
Oh, we don't get to do the math on that one like we did.
No, I didn't.
guessing game
I
this
wasn't.
time?
I wasn't making you guess that time.
This is
'cause
horseshit.
You failed so miserably last time. I didn't want you to embarrass yourself.
No, I wanted to make you correct me so people like you more.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I think I'll be okay.
I doubt it.
If they
After
don't
this
like me, they
episode,
just won't listen.
You're gonna have raging comments. Bring him back. Bring him back.
Okay. Rogers was 16 at the time of the murders. The juvenile witness was 11. Rogers had purportedly been a runaway, but had been staying in different places in Vidalia, and Rogers had joined the Navy shortly after the incident and had been assigned to the Kitty Hawk in the Philippines, which is where the Navy interviewed him and kept him in custody until he was extradited. Sheriff Fred Sheely flew to Treasure Island, California at the end of March 1978 to retrieve Rogers and bring him back to Vidalia to officially be charged and have his bond set.
So he got to go have fun at Treasure Island.
I don't think he had fun at Treasure Island.
Bullshit, it was the 70s.
I don't know about all that.
I guarantee you he did something.
I'll ask his grandson, see if he knows of anything.
I don't want to talk to him.
So, on April 4th, 1978, James Clayton Rogers Jr. was officially magistrated by Judge R.P. Boyd, and he was held without bond. Rogers told the court that he could not afford an attorney and was subsequently appointed a public defender named Jerry Day, who eventually stayed on as co-counsel with defense attorney Weber. No arraignment date was set because a grand jury had to be reconvened to indict Rogers, and once that happened, they would set a date at that time. So on April 20th, 16 days later, the grand jury returned 2 true bills for the first-degree murder and the armed robbery. Now, we've covered what a true bill means. Do you know what that means when it comes to the grand jury?
A true bill? Mm-hmm. It means it's not a lie?
Well, no, it means they have sufficient evidence to proceed to trial.
Right.
With the charges, in their opinion. So, Rogers at that time was currently undergoing a psychiatric evaluation at the State Mental Hospital in Jackson to see if he was competent for trial, and he was eventually found competent and ready to stand trial on May 25th, 1978. So it took them from March to May to find him competent.
Just a little geography reference here. Jackson, Mississippi is only like 2.5 hours away from Vidalia.
Okay, good. That's good to know. Only 5 days later, after he was found competent and ready to stand trial, Tuesday, May 30th, the Concordia Sentinel published an article that said the sheriff's office was still trying to locate their juvenile witness who had reportedly come up missing on Saturday, 3 days earlier. Apparently, they'd be keeping him, like, in custody or in some kind of, like, safe house or something so that he'd be able... No, he was eventually found. Like, he just kind of randomly showed back up, and that's crazy, too, because, like, I saw that they published the article that he was missing, but then they never published anything saying that he was quote-unquote found. But apparently, and we'll get into this later, he had a history of kind of disappearing. So, never found the other article saying he'd been found or whatever, but he does testify, so we obviously know that he came back and was found. Now,
they used the elaborate set of puppets.
Maybe. I don't know. Alright, so this is odd for me, but let me see if I can get it straightened out for everybody.
Alien projection.
On June 11th, 1978, law enforcement and the prosecutor, they were both worried about the juvenile being available for testimony when the trial eventually happened. They decided to perpetuate
I knew that word.
perpetuate Ernest Dennison Martin, who went by Dan, the 13-year-old eyewitness. They decided to perpetuate his testimony into the record, which means that they got it on official recording to be able to use in a court of law for later. He testified that he had been present in the store when Rogers and Miss Evelyn went to the back of the store, and then he heard gunshots. He said Rogers, who was only 16 at the time, asked Dan to be a lookout because he, quote, wanted to get some money, unquote. He testified that there was a .22 caliber pistol missing from his house, and he believed the police now had it.
Sounds pretty scripted.
Yeah, well, it seems a lot convenient and self-serving in my mind. Because it's like, oh yeah, no, I saw him do it, but it was the gun that was at our house.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely sounds fishy.
Yeah. Dan also testified that after the robbery/murder, he saw Rogers run out, and then he followed him. Rogers then told Dan not to say anything, and then asked if he wanted some money and showed him the rolled up bills in his pocket. He then says that he didn't see Rogers until he got back from the Navy, although he did get a threatening letter that said he'd, quote, come back and get him, unquote, if he talked about anything that happened about 2 weeks after Rogers left. But conveniently, or inconveniently for him, he no longer had the letter. He said that it went missing. Didn't have that as any actual proof that he was threatened. And because they were perpetuating this into the record, they actually had the defense present to be able to cross-examine the witness. And he admitted on cross that he'd run away from home before and that he'd smoked marijuana. And when they asked why it took him 15 months to come forward, he said he didn't know. But he didn't help plan the robbery, nor did he give Rogers the gun. But he also wasn't threatened to participate or anything like that. He just kind of agreed when Rogers asked him to come and be his lookout. So, eventually we get a statement released from the defendant, who is always referred to as Navy Seaman James C. Rogers Jr. at the beginning of all the articles that I read. He slowly started to change his story. So initially he told investigators that things were kind of fuzzy. He remembered being in the store. He remembered Miss Evelyn reaching behind some boxes and, quote, falling, but only remembers like a loud explosion, and then he took off running, and maybe he ditched the weapon in the corner of a pasture by a Baptist church, and then he says he doesn't really remember anything until he got to Atlanta, Georgia. And when he got to Atlanta, Georgia, he said he vaguely remembered being in West Virginia, but he couldn't give you any specifics. And eventually, sometime in the following year, he enrolled in the Navy and had been serving aboard the Kitty Hawk.
Like I said, 70s were a hell of a time.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, like, even if you were 16, apparently. Or 11,
yeah.
in the other kid's case.
Started young.
Yeah, wait for it.
Wait, were the
there.
two boys even friends?
Yes. Yeah, they had been, like, they had hung out around before, but, like, everything that I read, it made it sound like Rogers was just kind of like a floater. He didn't really have, like, a steady home that he lived in. He was just kind of...
He was a vagrant.
Kind of. Well, it was the 70s. There you go. A lot of hitchhiking and free loving. And,
I know. I've been saying that the whole time.
yeah. So on September 21st, 1978, a little over 2 years since Miss Evelyn's murder, Navy Seaman Roger, he officially pled a dual plea, which I had never heard of before.
It means two.
No. It means that he pled not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. So...
That counts to two.
Yes, but... I've never heard of them pleading not guilty and then also pleading not guilty to by reason of insanity, and I guess that's something that was different in the 70s with legal something. I don't know. I just know that I've never heard it called that, like a dual plea. I've heard him say I'm not guilty by reason of insanity, or I'm just not guilty, but I've never heard of them being used both at the same time like that.
He was doubly not guilty, he said.
Okay.
He wanted to make sure dual not guilties.
Well,
like, if you know pistols, dual pistols are better than one pistols.
So two guilty pleas, not guilty pleas means he's doubly not guilty. Gotcha.
That's exactly what that means.
Okay, so his public defender did his due diligence with motions to suppress multiple statements, motions to change venue, but the trial date kept getting pushed back for different reasons, whether it was new evidence. He eventually hired a private attorney. That in itself caused a delay because at that point, then the new attorney has to be given time to get familiar with all of the discovery. And then finally, from September of 1978, when he pled the dual plea, in May of 1979, jury selection began. So nearly 50 witnesses were subpoenaed to testify in this trial. The defense's main strategy reported that they would point out the real killer, and they would be in the courtroom, and that they planned to show that it wasn't their clients. So who do you think they're going to pin everything on?
The boy.
The 11-year-old at the time, Dan. They planned on pinning everything on him.
Which, I mean, it is kind of sus.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you, but as we look at our courtrooms and our procedure in today's world, juveniles are highly protected. Like, they don't use their names. If they're used as witnesses, a lot of times they don't even record. Like, if it's a televised trial, juveniles won't be shown on camera. They'll allow their voice to be recorded, but not their face. I mean, like, there's all kinds of things that they go out of their way to do to protect juvenile witnesses.
That's because they're scared. Like, the bikers have a very, very large group of them that literally go and sit in the courtrooms.
And just intimidate witnesses?
With people. No. Not witnesses.
Oh.
That go with the little kids.
Oh,
that
with,
have
like,
been abused
juvenile.
or something like that. Yes. It's like Hell's Angels, I think, is one of the big ones.
I hear what you're saying.
And they
go
go
don't mess with these babies.
They go in there with the kids to protect them. Well, to give them peace of mind.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
it works 100% of the time.
I believe it. Well, apparently that wasn't the case in the 70s, because this 14-year-old kid was torn to literal shreds on the stands. And I'm not talking about, like, they were just bullying him or picking on him. No.
They literally tore him to shreds, like, piece by piece.
No, not that literal, Sawyer. Come on.
You said literally.
Okay, so they made him proclaim on the stand that he had been smoking dope at age 11 and had done it multiple times.
So had everybody else in the 70s.
They had made him openly confess and say on the stand that he had been sexually involved with multiple females since he was 10 years old.
What a pimp!
The defense attorney was quoted...
You can't be talking, bro.
The defense attorney was quoted as saying that Dan, still a 14-year-old boy, was the sorriest human being you will ever see. To the jury.
Well, we don't know what he looked like.
Oh my gosh, come on. There's also mention of a bait letter that law enforcement had Dan send to Rogers while he was on board the Kitty Hawk, trying to get Rogers to confess, kind of like an old school wiretapping session or wiretapping phone call, like trying to get him to elicit some, guilty knowledge, but they got no response, so their wiretapped letter didn't work. In reference to Rogers' statement that he gave the naval officers, he said he didn't know where the gun came from or how it wound up in his hands or being used in the robbery. He said he had no idea. He also said again that Miss Evelyn pushed the boxes over at him and he kind of fell or moved backwards, and then he heard a loud noise and then he heard a ringing in his head and that it was all fuzzy. His defense attorney pointed out that Rogers couldn't have been the shooter because he checked into a halfway house / truck stop that was too far away for him to have been able to get back and commit the robbery murder. He even said that he would and did have witnesses that testified to seeing Rogers on the 20th, August 20th, peeling potatoes states away. So, keeping all that in mind, let's get back to little Dan Martin. Badgering a witness, and specifically a juvenile witness, was a thing, apparently, because he was made to stand up in court, look directly at Rogers, and tell him, "You blew Miss Evelyn's brains out." Verbatim. That's what they made him stand up in court and look him in the eye and say, "You blew Miss Evelyn's brains out." In front of the jury, and the judge allowed it. A 14-year-old child.
I don't get it.
They don't do that to, grown-ass men. It would be considered wildly inappropriate.
Well, it's wildly inappropriate, yeah, but he did it.
Okay, well, I guess, yeah. Not to mention that they made him talk about his sexual exploits, which apparently were multiple enough in detail for at the time, a 14-year-old. The actual testimony that had to do with the case was that Rogers had asked to borrow money. When Dan said he didn't have any, Rogers asked him to come out and watch for him when he was going to steal some money, and he assumed that that's what he was doing. He didn't think he was going to do anything else. He said he didn't know until after everything that happened that when Rogers was at his house, that he had gone back into Dan's house before they left, and he realized then that when he went back in, that was when he retrieved the gun from his house. He also said that he recalled later, Dan did, that when Rogers came back out, he had his hand in his pocket, quote, like he had a gun in it. So
that's convenient.
Very, very. I agree with that. All kind of pieces everything so nicely together, you know what I mean? Like, it just sounds too
scripted, like I said
That's
earlier.
exactly right. So they're getting through witnesses and all these inflammatory headlines, and then on May 28th, 1979, another roadblock on a case that's had way more than its fair share. The judge's father passes away. Judge R.P. Boyd's father died, so there was an immediate mistrial declared. So not only did they have to stop proceedings, they had to completely start over. New jury pool, the whole thing. So, in the interim, the sheriff's office actually filed charges of aiding and abetting the robbery and on the death of Miss Evelyn on Dan Martin, and called it kind of a continuation of the case. And then, eventually, before the new trial got started, Dan actually pled guilty to the charges of aiding and abetting the robbery and death of Miss Evelyn. And I don't know, because I couldn't find it in any of the news articles, what his sentencing, if there was any, that came along with that. I just know that he did plead guilty to that, so he was a felon. And after after things finally got going again, it was January 1980. Remember, she was murdered in August of 76. So 3.5 years after her murder occurred, things were looking the same. Prosecution laid out armed robbery murder gone wrong, with Dan Martin as their star witness. Muddied as he may be, the defense's strategy blamed Dan completely, and they even tried to pin blame on not just him, but him and 2 of his brothers, saying that they had all kind of acted in cahoots, and then they were all trying to blame Rogers.
They're the only one that was in the military and out of the country.
Yeah.
Perfect plan.
And the defense had multiple witnesses saying that he was in another place, hundreds of miles states away, on the day that the murder occurred. So, Rogers got on the stand in his own defense and said he only confessed to the naval investigators was because he felt pressured and bullied, and he wasn't in the right frame of mind and felt like he had no...
The what? The right what?
The right frame of mind? What did I say? Was it bad?
Yeah, it was bad.
Okay. And he felt like he had to say what they wanted to hear or he'd never get out of the interrogation situation. The defense called witnesses that backed up the story, and the defense and the prosecution, both sides, rested after Rogers got off the stand, and they called those witnesses to back up his story. So, what do you think happened when the jury came back for this case?
They were fed a bunch of lies and slander.
But what was their verdict?
I'm guaranteeing they gave it a guilty one.
You would be wrong.
On who?
On January 28, 1980, the jury came back with a not guilty for the 20-year-old James Clayton Rogers Jr.
This is after the
naval
person
seaman.
died? After old boy's dad
Yeah,
died?
this is the new trial. This is the new trial.
Jury
the new jury, the new judge, the new trial that started in January 1980.
I believe that.
So, January 28th, 1980, they came back with a not guilty. And after a mistrial, years and years of motions and legal hoops, and basically a Chicago-style three-ring circus, Rogers was found not guilty and set free that same day.
Hooray! Now go after the little shit.
Well, that's the thing is, so what we have here illegally is a legally unsolved murder. The sheriff's office stood by their findings.
Legally unsolved or illegally?
Legally unsolved.
Okay, see, you sounded like you said illegally.
Okay.
It was illegally solved by means that are not legal.
What we end up with is solved, but legally unsolved murder.
That girl.
The sheriff's office stood by their findings, as did the prosecution, but since Rogers, the Navy seaman, was found not guilty by a jury of his peers, what you have is one kid he's pled guilty to being an accessory to the person that he is saying did it. But the person that he is saying did it was innocent. So that's where the case still is to this day.
And don't forget, this little boy's dad had the gun.
Right. Well, when he came to say that he was an eyewitness, I still couldn't verify if it was brought it from the house or if the dad, after he heard the son's statement, went to the field and located it. There was never any mention of that specifically, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah, but it was their gun.
It was their gun. Absolutely. Ballistics matched that, yes.
100%.
100%. So officially this is an unsolved case. In the court of public opinion, though, it is kind of up in the air because some people believe that Rogers did it. Some people, thought that it was all make-believe that was concocted by Dan and possibly his family to get him off the hook for something that was just an accident that wasn't supposed to happen.
Shot 3 times is an accident?
I don't think anybody actually intended for her to die. I just think that when they tried to get her to tell them where her purse was, where they knew more money was, that it escalated. And
she's 66 years old.
I agree with you. But apparently she was pretty sprightly because she was walking across the street to go to the bank in the middle of the afternoon in August in Louisiana, and that was not cool, I guarantee it.
She got shot 3 times and didn't die.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but 2 young lads that have a gun?
Lads, yeah.
Like, come on.
Well, technically, if you believe Dan's story, it was only the one guy with the gun. But that's where it is. That's the
Luckily,
injustice of an unsolved case to Miss Evelyn Lopoo. And talk about just nuts. But I did want to throw in, because I did look it up because I was curious, because we talked about frontal lobe development before, and you should know a lot about that.
Keep on talking that shit.
I'm going to do my best.
Keep on talking that
The
shit.
proven legality of intense interrogation tactics with people under 25 and the false confession facts. According to research, about 42% of juveniles studied in 340 exoneration cases had falsely confessed.
And special needs people are
absolutely
typically bullied into confessing.
Way
just to get out
more
of the
susceptible. Absolutely. I've seen way too many of those for sure. But that's almost 50% of 340 exoneration cases. That's almost 110 kids.
Yes, I do the math too.
That falsely confessed just to be out of that pressure, that situation.
Yes.
Compared to only 13% of adults.
Just like I agree with you all the time just to get you to stop talking.
Oh, come on. So that's the case of Miss Evelyn Lopoo, the technically still unsolved case. What do you guys think? Let me know what y'all think, because I'm on the fence on this one. I really am not sure. It's hard to believe the story, because everything, just the way that it falls into place so perfectly to not be Dan, even though everything kind of points to him being some kind of more of a role that he played in it than what he tries to make it out to be.
There's a reason that the people were being mean to him like they were. They knew something, probably, because they were his lawyers, or they were the defense. They knew something that we don't. Because they didn't just go in the courtroom and be like, so today, here's this badass little kid who's
the
a
sorriest human being you've ever met. And, like, all of the research that I got from this case, obviously, it was 1976. All I had were these newspaper articles. I don't know. I just think it was extremely interesting. The first thing that caught my eye was the Vidalia murder capital of the world. I just thought that was hilarious for 3 murders in 1 year. And then the other part was the amount of just mud-slinging character decimation that they were doing on this 14-year-old boy on the stand. I just thought it was nuts.
He deserved it. I'm telling you, the dude killed her.
No 14-year-old deserves
Or
that. I don't care
bullshit.
how bad.
So dude come in and shoot your grandma in the head twice and in the chest once.
If
Point
he was the
blank.
one on trial, it might have been different, but he was an eyewitness. I don't feel like he should have been treated like that, regardless if he actually did it or
Maybe they were
not.
trying to
Give
get
him
his
his day in
will.
trial and then drag him through the mud. Don't do that to him while he's on the stand, because
He came
14-year-olds,
back on his own and,
they still
and
have,
confessed.
there are a lot of development. He didn't
Or
technically confess.
bullshit.
He gave a statement as an eyewitness, which led to the arrest of somebody that was exonerated later.
Yeah, and it took him 18 months to go up and do it.
Yeah.
See, I'm telling you, there's something fishy about that kid.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Where's he at now? We'll interview him.
That is an excellent question. I am not into the investigative journalism side of things, so
That's why
I'm just reporting these stories
I'm a PI,
as a
you're not.
form of relaying interesting cases and facts that I found that I think other people will find interesting and entertaining. So
Yeah, well, this is a good take on the other side of the spectrum that your brain works on. Bullshit.
Well, thank you so much, Uncle Sawyer, for sitting in, because
You're welcome.
Kyler bailed on us.
You're welcome.
And thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys come back week after next to hear the next episode. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you just want to let me know what you think, which side of the fence you land on. Do you think it was Rogers? Do you think it was little Dan Martin? Or do you think it was Dan Martin with someone else? Or what is your opinion? Just let me know. The email will be linked in the show notes below. sinlawpodcast@gmail.com. And I have had a really rough time talking tonight, so I hope this wasn't hard to listen to.
Oh, it's hard to listen to when I'm not talking.
Thank you guys so much. Take care out there.
Also, don't be too harsh on her. I probably won't be on another one. Unless she begs real good.
Bye.
Deuces!
This has been an Elf Audio production.